I want to start with one of the older debates in psychology, and Sonja addresses this in her book, The How of Happiness, which is, can we really become happier? You know, there was a belief for a long time that we're stuck on the so-called hedonic treadmill, that no matter what happens to us, good or bad, we tend to just get back to the same level. That we might have a brief change, but we have this sort of set point of happiness. And there was a famous study that the journalists loved to quote from the 1970s about lottery winners. And the study supposedly showed that winning the lottery didn't make you any happier. In fact, it didn't even make you happier than somebody who'd been in a terrible accident and was paralyzed. And this seemed to be, you know, that was the evidence for this great treadmill that we're stuck. Fortunately, though, that wasn't really a very serious study. It didn't really track the winners. And later, some researchers actually did track some lottery winners, and the good news was actually that winning the lottery did make them happier. You know, 2 years later, they were a bit happier, and there was also research showing that being in a terrible accident can make you less happy. So we can affect our happiness, but as Sonja has shown so well in The How of Happiness, most of us don't realize what makes us happy and what doesn't. And you've got a great pie chart in that book, Sonja, a pie chart showing what influences happiness. I wonder if you could start by explaining that.
Sure. And hi, John. It's so great to talk to you. And I think I remember meeting you years ago at a social psychology conference. So it's funny that you mentioned the lottery winners study, because when I was in grad school, I just last year celebrated the 30th anniversary of doing research on happiness. I started as a first-year graduate student in 1989. And that was, I remember reading that study. That was the first thing I read. It's been kind of widely misinterpreted, I think. But the idea, I guess, back then is that there was a lot of pessimism about whether you can actually improve happiness. Because the idea was that, first of all, there's evidence that there are really powerful genetic influences on happiness. And that's true. I mean, there are genetic influences on happiness. Any of us who have children know that, you know, some of them are really happy, others are less happy, even though you seem to raise them in a similar environment. And then hedonic adaptation plays a really big role. Actually, one of my books, The Myths of Happiness, is all about that. So hedonic adaptation, or the hedonic treadmill, is this idea that human beings are remarkably good at getting used to changes in their lives, right? So something really good happens to us, we win the lottery, we get married, we buy a new house, we buy a new pair of shoes. We first get really happy, but then that happiness doesn't last forever. We kind of go back to our baseline. Same thing with negative events. I mean, it's good for negative events to have adaptation, right? So we lose our job, we get divorced, we have something negative happen, and we tend to adapt. Not to everything. So it turns out actually major disability is something that we never completely adapt to on average. But anyway, so yeah, the question of like, can we become happier? And I guess I wouldn't be here if I didn't think the answer was no. We can become happier, but it takes a lot of work. It's like with anything in life, with any kind of goal. If you want to be a better, gardener, a better chef, a better father, a better accountant, you have to work at it. And you have to create new habits that can sort of maintain that happiness. And so much of my career has been sort of devoted to sort of what kinds of behaviors or strategies or habits can people develop to sort of increase their happiness and to maintain that increase.